This terrain is the world's largest piece of rechargeable terrain and has lights internally around a campfire and in the trees. Stay tuned to see how I built it. Hello terrain engineers, David here with Terrain-Tronics. This week we're building on some of the 12-inch diameter kits that I sell at Terrain-Tronics to build a typical D&D scene. This is a typical rest stop for your D&D players where they might get awoken in the middle of the night to an attack. All this work is heavily influenced by the Professor Dungeon Master over at Dungeoncraft and his ultimate dungeon terrain efforts. Additional inspiration comes from the likes of Star Wars, Swiss Family Robinson, and even The Secret of Monkey Island. I started with the trees required. I could have crafted trees out of foam, but I'm not that great with foam and clay, so I went straight to Thingiverse. User Terrain for Print had already some on there. I downloaded them and scaled them appropriately to the size of my terrain, which is 12 inches by 12 inches, and started placing them. I wanted them around the sides, if you will, leaving a site in the middle for a campfire. I used multiple layers of foam to allow me to create channels for electronic storage and for wiring, and to create a variance in the height of the floor and so on. In terms of electronics, I knew I wanted lights in the tree similar to what they did in some of the Star Wars movies. And really, who doesn't love a campfire for a D&D story?
Good night, Ned.
I started with fairy lights that come with a battery pack built into them, and then added some flickering yellow LEDs available from Terrain-Tronics.com for the main campfire. If we look at this from a block diagram perspective, you start off on the right where we have a USB battery charger followed by a power switch. The USB charger circuit charges the battery and provides power to the Conway Castle board through the power switch. This means that whilst the charger board is plugged into an externally USB power source, it will always charge the battery, even when the lights are switched off. That's going to make it great for storing and charging between games. As soon as you remove USB power, then the lights continue to be switched on by being powered from the battery. Doing it this way allows the terrain to rotate on a lazy Susan bearing without getting caught up on a wire. Internally, the fairy lights are treated as a single channel on the Conway Castle LED driver, and the LEDs in the fire pit use the other 3 channels. This allows the brightness of the fire pit and the lights in the trees to be controlled together. In the description below there's links for the battery, the switch, the USB charger board that was used along with the LEDs from Terrain-Tronics that give that wonderful warm glow. I also created a bracket that could hold the switch and the battery. The STL for this is on Thingiverse to download and linked below. Inside the kit we have the bracket with a USB charger, switch, battery, and a Conway Castle board, and then some extra wire to wire everything together. Now in the Conway Castle kit you normally get 2 boards and an additional resistor, but we don't need them in this case, so we simply break off one of the boards. Normally we power a Conway Castle board through the USB. However, the board itself has 2 extra points where a resistor would normally go. We can now bring in voltage sources below 24 volts, providing we never hook in a USB power supply directly to that Conway. The black negative wire is connected directly from the USB charger to the Conway Castle board. The red positive wires will be connected out of the board into the switch, and then out of the switch into the Conway Castle board. The positive goes in here, and the negative goes in here. A little solder here and there, and we are good to go. The negative is connected here, and you can see the positive is connected in this loop through the switch. And finally, the batteries are connected on the 2 middle pins, red for positive, black for negative. And voila! You can see here that the battery is being charged by the external USB and the test LEDs are being switched on through the switch. Now let's look at these fairy lights. They typically come soldered or crimped onto a battery pack. We're going to cut them off at the wire that is on the battery side of the tiny crimp. Then we're going to use the wire wrapping tool, available at Terrain-Tronics, to wire up the LEDs and the fairy lights. You can see how easy it is to do in this case, even without a soldering iron. The trees themselves need a platform. I designed one and was able to laser cut it along with the brackets and then put floors in it by using drink stirrers. Then came time for the sculptor mold, which I pre-mixed with black and brown paint, so if the terrain ever chipped, you would never see the white plaster. Finally, a little flocking using some of Geek Gaming Scenic's ground cover and some foam flock. Plenty of online videos that talk about that can do a way better job than me. Now the fun bit. I needed a fire pit that I could put LEDs into. I turned to a new tool in my arsenal, VR sculpting, in an app called Medium. It allows you to pick up, twist, shrink, pull your model and sculpt in what can only be described as expanding foam. There are a number of stencils that resemble rocks which you can pick up and move to create a fire pit. This model is available to download for free with a code that you receive when you order LEDs from Terrain-Tronics. Many thanks to Narb Makes for the inspiration. Platforms up in the trees would be dangerous without some kind of railing. It would be dark without some kind of lighting on there too. For this I used 4mm jump rings along with some jute twine and some beads. And finally, some cut up bamboo skewers. I created a little production line of them and glued them together and then fed the jute twine along them. I dyed the jute twine a little darker with watered down brown paint. And with a fire pit 3D printed and painted, things were starting to look really good. Now I'm really pleased with the finished results. The bottom layer used 3 pieces of foam, which I left unpainted to show my customers at the convention. The entire piece fits in a 1 foot by 1 foot by 1 foot shipping box that could be used in virtually any Dungeons & Dragons game. If you like what you've seen today, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'd love to know how you would improve this terrain because I'm no expert in paint and glue. Also, how would you use this terrain in a game that you were DMing? Comment below. Finally, if you do want to support this channel and some of my work, please check out Terrain-Tronics.com. If you're in Europe, I also have a store on Etsy that handles all the import tax and everything else. There I have lots of clever boards, tools and LEDs that you can use to build this and similar terrain. Thanks again.